Okay, so we're doing the final vision tonight in the 8 night visions, chapter 6. So I'll ask someone please to read just verses 1 to 8 to start off with.
Again, I lifted my eyes and saw, and behold, 4 chariots came out from between 2 mountains. And the mountains were mountains of bronze. The first chariot had red horses, the second black horses, the third white horses, and the fourth chariot dappled horse, all of them strong. Then I answered and said to the angel who talked with me, "What are these, my Lord?" And the angel answered and said to me, "These are going out to the 4 winds of heaven after presenting themselves before the Lord for all the earth. The chariot with the black horses goes towards the north country. The white ones go after them, and the dappled ones go toward the south country." When the strong horses came out, they were impatient to go and patrol the earth. And he said, go patrol the earth." So they patrolled the earth. Then he cried to me, "Behold, those who go toward the north country have set my spirit at rest in the north country."
Good, thanks Tony. All right, maybe one of the more perplexing of the visions, possibly. Well, what are your first impressions or questions about that? Or anything that stood out?
Reminds me of Revelation.
Yeah. So the four horsemen in Revelation 6.
Red horses, black horses.
Yeah.
Famine, bloodshed.
Yeah. So the 4 colours correspond exactly to the 4 horses in as the seals are opened in Revelation 6. Yeah.
Are we told where the red horse goes?
Yeah. Did you notice that? Nothing was said about where the red horses go.
I was just going to say, there's also horses in that earlier vision where they're standing amongst the myrtle trees or whatever. And my mind says, well, is there a connection with those horses or not?
Yeah. Yep. So you spotted that link. So the first vision in the 8 has 4 horsemen, and now the final vision in the 8 has 4 horsemen, or horses. Yeah. So there is what we'll see is they're like bookends of this whole set of visions.
Then I noticed the mountain is made of bronze. I'm wondering what.
Yeah, mountains of bronze. Yeah. We'll see what the significance of that could be in a moment. What does Zechariah see? Let's just kind of picture it in our eyes. So 4 chariots, so 2 mountains made of bronze, 4 chariots coming out from between the 2 mountains of the 4 different colours. And we're told that the horses are strong. So I guess there's a slight difference with the first vision. They were 4 riders on horses. Now we have 4 chariots pulled by horses. So it's a much stronger, more urgent kind of picture happening here.
Each chariot has at least 2 horses.
Yeah. Chariots would have. Yeah, and that's a chariot. Is designed for speed and strength, so a chariot would travel faster and further than maybe just a horse on its own. And they're coming out from between these 2 bronze mountains, and going out into the earth, into all the earth, into the 4 winds. Although notice it says the 4 winds of heaven. So maybe these chariots were actually, they're coming out of the mountains and then going up into heaven and flying out, which again speaks even more of speed they haven't got time to travel the roads. They're going up and they're flying so they can get out quickly. Here's what our friend AI came up with. So anyway, that's maybe something like what it would have looked like from Zechariah's point of view. So the bronze mountains. Now in the temple that Solomon built, there were 2 bronze pillars made out of bronze, either side of the Holy of Holies. So as the priests went into the Holy of Holies, into the Lord's presence, they would have walked between these 2 bronze pillars. We're actually told in 1 Kings 7 that they had names. Jachin and Boaz were the names of these pillars. Jachin means established and Boaz means strong. Well, they don't actually mean that, but they're derived from those 2 words, established and strong. So the picture was there. This is the Lord's temple, this is the Lord's throne, his presence, and he's established himself in this place with these 2 strong pillars holding his house.
Saying that bronze mountain represent Mount Olive and Mount.
Some say maybe Mount Zion and the Mount of Olives.
The Hidden Valley. I don't know.
Yeah, so the valley in between, and that's could be when Zechariah saw the 4 horsemen in the first vision, and he's told they were in the valley amongst the myrtle trees. That could have been the place where he was standing in the valley between Mount of Olives, and in that valley is also the Garden of Gethsemane, which was an olive grove. So that's one suggestion. But why? My question is why bronze? So I think this again it's symbolism that's supposed to direct us to the presence of God. So these are horsemen or chariots that are coming out from the presence of God. They're being sent by the Lord out into all the earth. And since the Lord doesn't yet have a temple, because it's still in the process of being built, they're mountains because the earth is his temple. So it's almost like, well, I don't yet have a house on Mount Zion with the bronze pillars, so I'm going to claim these mountains as the bronze pillars that mark my presence.
So if the bronze pillars weren't in existence, why refer to them?
Because they would have known the design of Solomon's temple, the one that was destroyed. Yeah. So, and you can read that in 1 Kings 7 is the description of the design of Solomon's temple with those bronze pillars. So like the 4 horses of Revelation 6, these horses are being sent out from the Lord's presence to do his will in the 4 corners of the earth. We see that, as I mentioned, there's this idea of a strength. The horses are called strong. Verse 3, all of them strong, chariots and the speed and the taking flight up into the heavens gives that impression that, okay, the mission that they're on is urgent. It's a much stronger picture than the 4 horsemen in Vision 1. So, as I said, this is like a bookend. The set of visions open with the 4 horsemen who had just returned from patrolling the earth and were reporting back to the Lord the state of the earth, and they announced the earth is at rest. And remember, then the Lord said, I'm going to bring judgment on these nations who are at rest, because their rest, their ease, is actually an ease of arrogance, because they think they've conquered the world. They think that the peace on earth is because of their strength, and I'm going to show them that it's not. So, in Vision 1, they returned from the earth, reporting the nations were at rest, and now the patrols are being sent out again, now that the visions 2 to 7 have taken place. So the first patrolman said, here's the state of the earth. Then the Lord gave these visions, which were his decrees about what he's going to do. And now he's saying, now I'm going to send out my patrols and they'll tell you now what's the state of the world, given what I have decreed and what I've said I'm going to do. What's their report? Before that, verse 6. So we see that the black and white horses go north, the dappled horses go south. The red horses aren't mentioned. So there's some speculation about why. Some scholars say that there's been a bit of textual alterations there, because the word for strong was also apparently used to describe a strong dark red colour. So some commentators have suggested, well, when it says in verse 7, when the strong horses came out, that's a reference to the red horses, possibly. And someone said, well, therefore the red horses were kind of rovers. They were going everywhere, not just to the north or to the south. But I don't think that quite fits, because we're told that these horses are going out to the four winds of heaven: north, south, east and west. So I think it's just, the red horses aren't mentioned, but it's kind of implied that these four coloured horses are heading out ultimately in four different directions. Because if you want to go east from Israel, you actually need to go north first, because directly east is just desert. There's nothing. So if you're heading east, you go north, and then you can go east right across into Persia. So probably the black and the white are going north, but once they go up, then one will maybe go west and one will go east. Who knows? But I think that the fact that there are two chariots heading north, it's in the direction of Assyria and Babylon and Persia, which is this great empire. So it's almost like the extra resources are being channeled to this vast kingdom of Persia. Whatever it is, I think the Lord is sending his patrols to the four winds, and he's basically asserting the fact that, King Darius thinks he's the king of the earth, but I'm actually the king of the earth, and I'm sending out my patrols north, south, east and west. What's the report? Those who go towards the north country have set my spirit at rest in the north country. So remember, in the first vision, the nations are at rest, but it's a rest of arrogance and pride, and it was tenuous. Now that rest of the nations has been replaced with the rest of God's Spirit. In other words, he's in control. He's directing what's happening up in the country of the north, in the kingdom of the empire of Persia.
Does that mean when they've taken over the Babylon's Syria, God is happy when they've destructed them, then he's happy, his spirit at rest, because they conquered those people who attacked Israel, his people, God's people.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, because he makes it clear that when Assyria invaded and carried off the northern kingdom, the Lord said, well, that was my doing, but I'm going to judge Assyria by sending the Babylonians. So then the Babylonians were judgment upon Assyria, And then the Babylonians came down and took Judah captive. And the Lord said, well, that was my doing too, but now I'm going to judge the Babylonians. And so he sent the Persians, and the Persians were his judgment on the Babylonians. And I think here he's actually taking the next step, because now that Persia is in power, and that they still have this grip on Israel, on Judah, they're still in control. He's saying the time will come when Persia will fall, and I'll bring my judgment upon Persia as well. So the earth is at rest in the hands of Darius of Persia, and I think the Lord is saying here, well, that his time is also limited. Now, when he says my spirit at rest, he uses this word nuah, so it's not the word Sabbath rest. There's actually quite a few words in Hebrew for rest, and it could be that he uses the word nuah here, because that's the word that he uses in Exodus 20 when he's giving the 10 words and he's given the command about the Sabbath. And he says, in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested, nuah, on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So the use of that word is kind of linking it a bit with that 7 days of creation. So God does 6 days of work, and then the seventh there's rest, God's rest. And we see that pattern here too in these visions. Visions 2 to 7 are 6 days of God saying, I'll do this, I'll do this, and then the last vision is, now I'm at rest, because the work that I'm going to accomplish is completed. So 6 days of creation led to God's rest, and 6 decrees or acts of God will also lead to God's rest. God saying, I've accomplished what I am planning to do. And it's a rest that his people will participate in, just like creation was. He created the world 6 days, he rested, and then humanity was part of that restful celebration of the goodness of creation. In the same way, what God is accomplishing here in these visions will mean that his people will also have rest in that. So let's review then how these visions all fit together. You've got that diagram on your tables, and you may have picked up that the visions fit the pattern of a chiasm. Who can remember what a chiasm is? We've talked about it from time to time. Well, that's
the most important thing in the middle.
Yeah, so, and there's the definition there, a literary structure in which parallel terms or concepts are first introduced in order and then again in reverse order to make a point, often emphasising the middle concept. So we're used to a literary structure where you follow the argument through and then the main point is at the end of your argument. In the Hebrew way of thinking, you put the main point in the middle, and each side of it points in towards that middle main point. An example of a chiasm is Genesis 9:6. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. See how the outside ideas all point into the middle. So what's the main central idea in this simple statement? The focus is man, and who knows what it then goes on to say after saying, whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. It confirms what that main point is, because it says, for man is in the image of God. So the central idea there, man. Why is man the central idea? Because man is in the image of God. So if you shed the blood of man, then you're attacking God because he's the image bearer of God. So there's a very simple example of a chiasm. And once you know that structure, you find them all the way through the scriptures. Chiasms are just in there because it was the Hebrew literary way of writing and thinking, and maybe sometimes even the scriptural writers, they're in Paul's writings, chiasms popping up, probably because it's just so much ingrained in his way of thinking. He's probably not even thinking, now I'll say this sentence in a chiasm. He's just writing, and that's because of his Hebrew way of thinking. That's the way it comes out on the page. So our 8 visions are actually in a pattern of a chiasm. And you've got that diagram in your notes, so you can fill in the blanks. So you see how the first vision and the last vision are the horsemen, the patrols, the Lord receiving a report of what's taking place in the earth over which he is king. So, and I guess the key idea there is what is the state of the world? Is God in control or is man in control of the world is the question. The first one asks the question in essence and seems to say, looks like man's in control. The last vision answers the question and says, no, the Lord is in charge. Then we work our way inwards and see how vision 2 and 3 and 6 and 7 actually are together. This idea of preparing God's people for their anointed leader. So visions 2 and 3 are preparing God's people for living back in the land, in Jerusalem, with a king over them. And then visions 6 and 7 are about preparing the people to be able to worship as a holy, purified, cleansed people in the temple with a high priest over them. So then we come to the middle, which is about the anointed leader who's identified. And we see vision 4 is the high priest, anointed to lead God's people in worship. And vision 5 is the anointed king, Davidic, heir to the throne, who's anointed to rule over God's people as their king. Points to the middle. But what we'll see next, then, when we move on in chapter 6, is verses 9 to 15 kind of bring these the two anointed leaders together and actually unites them into one. And what we'll see in a moment is a royal priest will build the temple. Yeah, yes?
Temple was God's kingdom or not?
What do you mean?
They rebuild the temple. Does that say the temple is actually God's kingdom?
In the sense that the temple is God's throne, yeah. So if God's kingdom is to be established in the land on earth, then He needs a throne from which to rule over His kingdom, and the temple and specifically the Ark of the Covenant with the mercy seat was God's throne. Yeah. So it's God is kind of saying to His people, I'm your king, I'm ruling over all of the earth, and that's why you need to get working on building the temple so that I will actually have a throne from which to rule, from the midst of my people to rule over the earth. All right, let's read on then. Can someone read for us 9 down to 15?
And the word of the Lord came to me. Take from the exiles Heldai, Tobijah and Jedediah, who have arrived from Babylon, and go the same day to the house of Josiah, the son of Zephaniah. Take from them silver and gold, and make a crown, and set it on the head of Joshua, the son of Jehozadak, the high priest. And say to him, Thus says the Lord of hosts, Behold, the man whose name is the branch, for he shall branch out from his place, and he shall build the temple of the Lord. It is he who shall build the temple of the Lord, and shall bear royal honour, and shall sit and rule on his throne. And there shall be a priest on his throne, and the counsel of peace shall be between them both. And the crown shall be in the temple of the Lord as a reminder to Helem, Tobijah, Jedaiah, and Hen, the son of Zephaniah. And those who are far off shall come and help to build the temple of the Lord. And you shall know that the Lord of hosts has sent me to you. And this shall come to pass if you will diligently obey the voice of the Lord your God.
Okay, so really what is happening now for Zechariah is he's been told, well, you've seen these visions, now I want you to actually get up and go and do something, do a symbolic act that will communicate the essence of these visions to Israel or the Jews or at the very least the priests as they witness you doing this symbolic action. And we see that often with the prophets. The Lord says to a prophet, go and, he says to Ezekiel, go and lie on your side for, I can't remember what it was, 40 days or something, and then turn over and lie on the other side for another amount of days, and each time is, one represents the captivity of Israel and one represents the captivity of Judah. So the Lord gets the prophets to do these strange actions, and they're role-playing what the Lord is planning to do with his people. So that's what he's doing here. So he's told to go and put a crown on Joshua's head, and that will say something significant about what the main point of these visions are, which is a royal priest will build the temple. Now, notice there's no mention here of Zerubbabel. In fact, this is the last time Zerubbabel's mentioned in Zechariah. And I think there's a point in that, because the focus of this is actually the two anointed ones, the two olive trees that we saw in those other visions, Joshua and Zerubbabel, the king and the priest, are actually going to be combined in one man. So that's why he's just doing this action with one man. Now he's told to go to get these exiles, Hildad, Tobiah, Jedaiah, and then Josiah. The question is, who are they? Well, we know that Jedaiah and Zephaniah were priests because they're mentioned in other places, in Nehemiah and in 2 Kings. So I think the implication is that they're all priests. So he's saying go to these, they're probably the priests who were heading up the work of building the temple, possibly, the leaders of the priests. So go to them, get silver and gold from them and make a crown, and then put it on the head of Joshua. But there's a bit of an incongruence here in verse 11, though. A crown put on the head of the high priest doesn't quite work. Because remember what was placed on Joshua's head in one of the visions?
A clean turban after he had messy clothes.
Yeah, clean turban, which is the correct headdress for a high priest. Not a crown, a turban with the plate on the front that said holy unto the Lord. So it's kind of, he's mixing up the headdress of a king and the headdress and the clothes of a priest, and kind of combining a king and priest in the one person. So it's supposed to be a incongruent picture to make people think, oh, hang on, why is the priest wearing a crown? That's not his job. His job is to minister in the temple, not to be a ruler over the people. Now in Vision 4, Joshua, after he was given the clean turban on his head, was told of the coming person who was called the branch, but that was in a vision. So Joshua back then wasn't literally told, it was just the Joshua who was appearing in the vision. Now Joshua, the real Joshua, needs to be told to look forward to this one who is to come, whose name is the branch, and what he will accomplish. He will branch out from his place and build the temple of the Lord. Now I thought Joshua and Zerubbabel were going to build the temple of the Lord. Now he's saying to Joshua, there's this other guy called the branch, and he's going to build the temple of the Lord. So what's going on?
So would that mean that they are just types of something?
Yeah, so what Joshua and Zerubbabel are doing in building this physical temple on Mount Zion is just foreshadowing the day when the branch will come and he will build the real temple, the greater temple, of which this one is just a foreshadowing or a type.
It would refer to Jesus, I would imagine.
Yeah, Jesus.
Because this was that. Jesus is going to build his kingdom.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And he's the branch.
Jesus is the branch. He is the shoot, the offspring of David.
It's interesting when Jesus does actually come. The Herod's temple was actually completed in AD 60.
Yeah.
And Jesus already foreshadows its demise.
Yeah.
On the Olivet Discourse. So that was really just pointing towards the reality that he's actually going to build his church or the temple.
The true temple, yeah.
Which is going to be made up of living stones.
Yeah. So there's that very tense moment when Jesus is in the temple. He's cleared of all the money changers, and the Pharisees say, "What authority do you have to do this?" And Jesus says, "Destroy this temple, and I will build it in 3 days." And of course, he's talking about himself. Destroy this. Here's the authority I have. I'm going to allow you to destroy me, crucify me, and then I will be raised up in 3 days and rebuild the temple. But he's also in that foreshadowing the fact that the temple they were standing in wasn't even finished yet. It wasn't going to be finished for another 30 years, and then not long after it was finally completed, the Romans came in and knocked it down. So it just, pointing to no need. The true temple was Jesus himself and the temple that he will build in his church.
We sometimes get a bit confused about the temple that was destroyed in 1780.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about that sort of temple, or we're talking in this context now.
The temple that was destroyed in 70 AD was technically still the temple that was built at the time of Zechariah. But King Herod decided to renovate and expand that second temple that was built 400 years plus earlier, and to expand it. So it was technically it was the same temple, but just much bigger and greater, just because of what Herod had done to it.
Surely that would completely demolish the discipline. This alone would destroy the dispensational claim, because they claim that there's going to be another physical temple that needs to be built in the church age, right? Or no, in the millennium, right? So that seems to be a bit incongruent. in terms of redemptive history. Like you're resurrecting a physical building when the reality of the spiritual has already come.
Yeah. So some look at some of the Old Testament promises about a rebuilt temple, especially in Ezekiel. So Ezekiel describes this temple and its measurements, and they say, well, the second temple built at this time didn't fit Ezekiel's description. Therefore, there's Ezekiel's temple has yet to be built sometime in the future. That's how they see it. But what we understand though from Revelation is that Ezekiel's vision of a temple was pretty much for a vision of the new heavens, the new earth, the new Jerusalem, the kingdom of God that's established in Jesus through his people, where the church are the temple. So Ezekiel has a vision of this Israel back in the land with this temple that's built. And then the exiles come back to the land, and it doesn't look anything much like Ezekiel's vision. So the conclusion that people make is, therefore, what Ezekiel saw is something that is yet to happen in Israel. And so that's when they say in the end times the temple will be rebuilt and it'll be like that. But I think if you have that view, then you're actually, you've lost that idea that, well, Jesus has fulfilled all the types and shadows of the Old Testament. So to go back to another physical temple in Jerusalem would be almost to backtrack on Jesus as the fulfillment of what the temple stood for. Anyway, so this branch that is yet to come, he's going to build the true temple that's going to be bigger and greater than the second temple.
Why branch? Why is branch used as an imagery there?
Yeah, good question. There are other prophecies that talk about Judah, or specifically the house of David, being like a tree that's been cut down to a stump. And there's a few words that are used in various prophecies to basically talk about this stump that appears to be dead, but then a shoot grows up. And so some prophecies use the word for shoot, some use the word for branch, but it's the same kind of idea that out of this stump that's been levelled to the ground, something new will come out of that, and that will be the Davidic house and the king that will come out of that. So, and
11:1, there shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his roots shall bear fruit, and the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him.
Yeah, so there's the two words, and I think if I remember rightly, even that word there for branch is a different word from the word here. They both mean branch, but it's a different word, and it's a word that's related to the name of a town that Jesus grew up in, Nazareth. So the name of Nazareth, the root of that word is actually branch. So when Matthew says that Joseph and Mary went and lived in Nazareth, where Jesus grew up, and Matthew says this was to fulfill what the prophet said, that he shall be a Nazarene. And there's no actual verse that actually says he shall be a Nazarene, except the fact that the word Nazarene has the same root as the word for branch. So Matthew's actually saying the fact that Jesus lived in a town called Nazareth is fulfillment and shows us that he is the branch that was prophesied.
The shoot is coming up.
The shoot is growing up, and he'll branch out from his place. And what will he do? When he branches out from his place, he shall build the temple of the Lord. So he's a priestly ruler. So we're told that verse 13, there shall be a priest on his throne. So it's a throne, so it's a kingly seat, it's a throne, but the one sitting on it will also be a priest. So there's a combination of kingly and priestly. And the council of peace shall be between them both. In other words, the priestly office and the kingly office will be together and will be working in perfect harmony. There will be no conflict between what the king wants and what the priests want. That has often happened in human civilizations. The civil powers have one idea and the religious powers have another idea, and they end up clashing, and then one tries to take over the other. But in this scenario, no, the priestly and kingly together, and there will be peace in their unity, the unity of office, combined in the one person, working in harmony in one man. So, verse 14 then, we're told that this crown, so the crown is then taken off of Joshua's head, and it's to be kept in the temple. When the temple's built, it's to be kept there so that these priests who are on duty there will see this crown and be reminded. It's a memorial. It's something that's to make them remember this prophecy, that there is one to come who will be a king here in the temple as the high priest. So they're reminded that their roles are just temporary. They're just types and shadows until the true branch priest king actually comes. Then we see in verse 15 what we could call two last days fulfillments. What will be the result of this priestly king and his ministry? Well, the first thing we're told is that those who are far off shall come and help to build the temple of the Lord. That term far off is used to refer both to the exiles who are still far off, over in Babylon or Persia or Syria or down in Egypt, wherever they've been scattered. So there's this picture of them being regathered, coming back, involved in the temple building. But it's also a term that's used to refer to Gentiles. When Solomon is dedicating the temple, he says, when those who are far off, who don't belong to your people, come to this house and they pray to you, then forgive them. So Solomon understood that this temple wasn't just there for the Jewish people. That temple was there so that people of all nations could come and seek the Lord and be forgiven and know that he's hearing their prayers. Just flip over to Ephesians 2, 3 and 17, and we see that idea in the New Testament. So 2 verse 13, from verse 12, remember that you at that time separated from Christ, alienated from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers to the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. But now in Christ Jesus, you who were once far off have been brought near by the blood of Christ. And he's talking here to Gentiles. And then verse 17, and he came and preached peace to you who were far off, and peace to those who were near. So you who were far off, you Gentiles, and you who were near, you Jews, and now you've been brought together and united in the one body through Christ. The other thing is that he says, you shall know that the Lord of hosts has sent me to you. And here's another instance where this is the Lord of hosts speaking, isn't it? Back in verse 12, say to Joshua, thus says the Lord of hosts. So the Lord of hosts is speaking, and then he says, and you shall know that the Lord of hosts has sent me to you. So how can that be that the Lord of hosts has sent the Lord of hosts to you? Well, it only makes sense if you have the doctrine of the Trinity, doesn't it? The Father, who is the Lord of hosts, Yahweh, has sent the Son, who is the Lord of hosts, Yahweh. the same, one God, two persons, or three persons, but in this passage, the Father has sent the Son to you. So the temple will be built by those.
What did the Jews do with that verse?
Sorry?
What did the Jews do with that verse?
That's a good question. I don't know. They probably just say, the quotation marks finish earlier. Because in Hebrew there's no quotation marks. So it's up to the translators to work out where the quotation actually ends. But the ESV translators, I think correctly, have acknowledged that it's verse 12 right through to the end of verse 15 are the Lord speaking to Joshua the high priest. But there were Jews, even at the time of Jesus, who acknowledged that there was this other figure that's spoken about in their scriptures who seems to be divine, but they couldn't reconcile it because they were told, well, God is one. How can it be that there's the Lord and then there's this other person that's spoken of in divine terms? And so there were actually some rabbis had suggested that maybe there's a plurality in God somehow, but that's as far as they went with it. And they were probably considered heretics by saying that. Finally, Joshua is told, this shall all come to pass if you will diligently obey the voice of the Lord your God. Now, is that saying then, all of these promises, everything that God has said He's going to do, it's all contingent on our obedience? Might seem like that at face value, doesn't it? God says, I'll do all these wonderful things, but you better be good. You better diligently obey, otherwise I'm not going to do anything I've promised. Well, remember who He's speaking to here. The Lord is speaking to Joshua, the high priest. He's not directly addressing Israel. He's not saying, okay, Israel, if you obey, then I'll do this. He's saying, okay, Joshua, here's your responsibility as the high priest, as the representative of my people. You are called to diligently obey everything I've called you to do, and your obedience will be then representative for the rest of Israel. So again, that's pointing to Christ, isn't it? Christ who diligently obeys on our behalf, even though we haven't obeyed and failed, and so his righteousness, his obedience, then is credited to us by imputation. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 6, which is just a New Testament expression of, or explanation of Jesus fulfilling this prophetic vision of a kingly priest. We're told in verse 20, it says where Jesus has gone. Where's He gone? He's gone, verse 19, He's gone into the inner place behind the curtain. So that's Jesus has gone into the holy place behind the curtain, into God's presence, and He's there as an anchor. He's secured our place in the holy place by being there as our high priest, our representative. Having become a high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. So Jesus is a priest after the order of Melchizedek. Now, why does Jesus need to be a priest in the order of Melchizedek?
It was just saying that he's both king and priest.
Yeah. But there's another reason why the writer of Hebrews is bringing this out, and the reason is the Jews particularly would say, hang on, you cannot claim Jesus is the great high priest because Jesus is from the tribe of Judah.
And when the wrong people try and be the priest, bad stuff happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not from the line of Aaron.
It's not from the line of Aaron. So how can Jesus be, you great high priest, you Christians? You're wrong. Well, the kingly line depends on your genealogy because the Messiah must be a descendant of David, of the house of David. The point that the writer of Hebrews is making, well, actually the Levitical priesthood was just a type, just a shadow, foreshadowing what was, and it was actually only foreshadowing part of what was to come. It was only foreshadowing the priestly aspect of the Messiah's ministry, but it was just a foreshadowing, and now the Levitical priesthood has been made obsolete. But Jesus is not of the order of Levi or of Aaron. He is of this other priestly order of Melchizedek. And we see in verse 2 of 7 that he's priest of the Most High, but we're told in verse 2 he is first, by translation of his name, King of Righteousness. And he's the King of Salem, the King of Peace. So Melchizedek was a high priest and a king, combined into the one role.
Yeah, then he goes on and talks about how Melchizedek blesses Abraham by offering him, Abraham gives him a tithe, Melchizedek a tithe.
Yeah.
And he says, because Aaron actually stems from Abraham. He's in the loins of Abraham.
Yeah.
So when Melchizedek offers Abraham offers Melchizedek a tithe, he's effectively, it's like Aaron is paying tribute to Melchizedek.
Yeah, because the greater blesses the lesser.
That's right.
Yeah, so when Melchizedek blessed Abraham, he was blessing Levi, who was in Abraham's loins. Well, not yet born, but a descendant of Abraham. Yeah, so the priesthood of that Melchizedek represents is greater even than the priesthood of Levi, of Aaron. So see what it says about this Melchizedekian priesthood. It's not dependent upon, well, he's both king and priest. It's not dependent on genealogy for priestly role. So he points out that verse 3, he is without father or mother or genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life. Now, I think what he's saying, he's not saying that this man, Melchizedek, the king of Salem, who met Abraham, didn't have a mother or father, or was eternal, but he's making reference to the fact that all we know about this guy Melchizedek is that he was king of Salem. It doesn't say anything about his parents. There's no genealogy to say where he came from. And so the scriptures themselves just have this figure, Melchizedek, suddenly appearing on the scene out of the blue. And in that sense, Melchizedek is resembling the Son of God. He's just like the Son of God in the way that he's presented in the scriptures, although not literally as a human being. So it's not dependent on genealogy for priestly role. It's not succeeded by the next generation. The priests, obviously the Levitical priests, would die and have to be replaced by the next generation of priests. But we're told that Jesus' priesthood, down in verses 15 and 16, this becomes even more evident when another priest arises in the likeness of Melchizedek, who has become a priest, not on the basis of a legal requirement concerning bodily descent, but by the power of an indestructible life. So Jesus' resurrection, in that sense, demonstrates that he is his priestly role continues. It's never going to come to an end because he's risen and he will never die. So he has this indestructible life and his ministry will be eternal.